Recording. All right, everybody, welcome to the webinar. This is Wendy Kurtzman. She is first and foremost such a badass. She's also a teacher, former casting director, former actress, still casting director, still been in this business for forever. But so everybody knows, I took a workshop at SAG-AFTRA called The Executive Actor, and I was obsessed with it. And then I forced Wendy to be my friend, and we went out to coffee. We had a great time. But one of my main pitches was I thought this was so applicable to creatives everywhere, but especially like multi-hyphenates, like many of us are. And a lot of times with writers, we get writer-directors, writer-producers, writer-director-producers, people who want writer-directors, whatever, all of it. And so this was just so fun and enlightening for me that I thought it'd be great for writers. And so she was game, and then Roadmap was game, and here we are applying this to writers. Wendy, please take it away.
Okay, that's a great intro. I appreciate that. I think what inspired me to do this is because as I've worked with creatives over the years, and I've certainly worked with them on the other side of the casting table, and then I've worked with writer producers in the room, and I've worked with executives at the networks, and I've been an executive at the network, and I've had a varied career working with lots of different facets of the industry. And then recently segueing into teaching and working with a lot of emerging artists, people coming out of BFA and MFA programs. What the biggest takeaway for me is on the most just basic level is how to proceed with purpose in this business, because I think this is a business that's very cyclical. It's a business that's very dependent on other people's recognition and other people's willingness to use relationships or to foster along certain things for you that get you kind of traction and get you going. But so much of that old paradigm is gone, and this new paradigm of really motoring your own boat and making everything happen for yourself is really real right now and exciting. I mean, it's a great time to be a creative for that reason. There's so many resources. So somewhere between the old paradigm of like, you know, I need to have an agent, I need to have somebody who's representing me, I need people who will, you know, who will be on my team and advocate for me and foster my career and this and that, and they'll kind of be the people that take care of that for me, and I'll just go be creative and fabulous. And between like, I don't have anybody, I don't have a team, I need more creative help, and I don't even know how to get started. Somewhere in between those two ideologies lies the truth. And I don't think no matter how successful you get or how much you're beginning, you still are never ever able to sit back and not take charge of your own career. You know, it's something that is still your responsibility no matter how well known you get, because there's certain factors and certain tentpoles of a career that are your responsibility, and if they fall apart can become ultimately devastating. So I created a model, and this is really out of just feeling that there was a perceptible need for something like a guidebook, almost like a prescriptive book. So I started writing a prescriptive book basically on how to be the CEO of your own company, which isn't a particularly revolutionary concept in and of itself, but as it applies to a creative or to an actor. And then as I started teaching it, I started getting more and more comments and conversation from other creatives saying, this, I can use this. I get this. I love this. This gives me something that centers me. This gives me a time management system. It gives me a very specific roadmap to how to get to where I want to go. And I think a lot of the how-to books and a lot of the books that are written by people who help others in the industry are very conversational and very experiential, from like where their experiences came from. And I was more interested, just my own need to kind of my type A personality. I just kind of needed to find out, like, give me some steps. Give me some very specific steps that I should be checking in with every day, every week, every month, that I should incorporate into my business on a daily basis so that I can feel like I can proceed and run my own universe, basically. So just for a matter of an exercise, what I would want every participant to do is to just draw a big oval circle, which is going to basically represent your boardroom table. And I want you to imagine that you are the CEO who comes in the morning, and the people that are in your company are sitting around this table. It's funny, when I wrote this, I called it the executive actor and 7 seats at the boardroom table. And my focus group were quick to tell me there's not 7 seats at the boardroom table because you didn't give your CEO a seat. And I thought, oh, okay, so it's 8 seats at the boardroom table. But then I also thought, you know what, the truth is the CEO probably never sits down because they're constantly running the business. So I want you to draw an oval circle, and I want you to create, aside from the CEO's seat at the top, at the head of the table, I want you to create 7 other chairs at that table. And I want to go in and fill in what those chairs are and tell you what those different jobs of those different chairs are and how they represent the different facets of your career. Since we can't really interact, and I can't ask, as I did when I was teaching, the day you and I met, I actually asked the group to help me fill in these chairs. And most people will get the first couple of them. And then the last couple of them are very elusive. So for lack of you being able to sit in a room with me, I'm going to fill in the chairs for you. So the first, other than the CEO, who acts as a figurehead, determines the incremental goals of the company and ensures that all these department needs, basically all these chairs, all the needs of these different pieces are met. Aside from the CEO, the very first chair that I put to the right or the left of the CEO would be the CFO, which obviously stands for the Chief Financial Officer. For me, finances are, I don't know I can't make a general assumption for all creatives or any one certain group, but I can tell you from the actor's standpoint and from the actors that I've worked with, and certainly the students, the demographic that I've worked with that's emerging out of college and out of MFA programs, a lot of these students are coming out with a lot of debt and a lot of need to organize their finances. And they're really uncomfortable discussing finance and really uncomfortable with how to organize it and how to allocate their finances. So for me, I spend a long time in the book talking about the role of the CFO and what the job of the CFO is, which is the CFO really runs the books. It pays your bills, it taxes, tells you what's exempt, creates an emergency fund, creates goal timelines so that the goals that you're making actually are financeable. And I'll explain that later. And also really dives into a lot of conversation about what strategic sideline jobs are and how to choose them that complement the main goal, which is to be, in the case of this seminar, a writer. But in the case of another seminar, to be an actor or to be whatever your main love and goal is. So the CFO is there to make sure that you are financially responsible and fiscally aware of what you are spending and what you are doing. I think what was really interesting is we did a focus group where we met and then we didn't meet for a couple of weeks. And in those 2 weeks, I asked everybody to keep a financial journal and to write down absolutely everything they spent, from the cup of coffee at Starbucks to the money that they put in the parking meter, to if they were in New York, the money that, how much they were putting on their Metro cards, if they took an Uber, when they went out to dinner, if they bought a drink, if they had an impulse buy and bought a cute piece of clothing or something that they just thought they needed. Whatever it was, if it was a medical expense, whatever, and keep a journal on that with every single thing that went out for a couple of weeks. And it was really revelatory for a lot of these, especially a lot of the younger actors, about how much money they were spending repeatedly on items they didn't need or items that they already had, or ways that they didn't even realize they were just $2 here and $5 here and this kind of stuff there. And why that's significant over time financially is because in our business, there are opportunities that come up all the time where you want to be able to take advantage of a seminar, or you want to go take a class, or you want to go learn from somebody, or you want to invest in materials or something that's going to further your career. And those things cost money. And when those opportunities come up, we want to be able to jump on them and take advantage of them. It might be a limited situation. It might be a limited time. And if we don't have the finances readily available, the first thing most people will do is resort to putting it on a credit card or resort to putting it in and financing it in another way. And if you don't have that money now, you're not going to have it then if you're not sitting and figuring out where that money's going. So putting the diary together allowed actors, when I were doing it with them, to see, wow, I'm actually spending, $20 more a week on something that I don't really need, that I've been just kind of buying because it's habitual and actually don't even need it and actually could make it myself. And so it became this interesting exercise in ciphering off $20 here, $20 there. Well, all of a sudden at the end of the month, I have, $80 that I didn't think I had. Well, there's a class that I know I want to take in a couple months. I put the 80 away. I'm getting the money that I need for the class. So it was a lot. The CFO chair is really about creating a worksheet for yourself. And in the book, there are worksheets, there are write-offs. It's a real workbook for you to have a check and balance of like, am I thinking about this? Am I working on this? And so I spend a lot of time talking about finances, because I really believe that if you're not financially stable, the rest of all this other stuff is very difficult to dive into, because the other stuff around the table, the other seats around the table require time. And unfortunately, time equates to money. You have to be able to carve out that time and afford to take that time if you're not using it to make money. So I talk a lot about also strategic sideline type of jobs. If everybody's lucky enough to get a full-time job in the career that they want, then this seminar is just great. This is just not for you, or it's like, yeah, great, I already am doing that and I'm like good to go. But if you're like most creatives, we work on project to project. We're independent. We come in, we get a job, we get 8 weeks, we get paid for something. We have to manage that over a period of time. We may not work again for a few months, and we're having to figure out what to do to sustain ourselves, or even if we are sustaining ourselves while we are doing our other jobs. So in other words, actors are going to auditions, writers are carving out time to write, but then we have to go to our sideline jobs, or what we call portfolio career jobs, that we take and do to subsidize ourselves. So I encourage everybody, for an actor, I say it's in your special skills section of your resume, which basically are all the things that you take for granted about yourself that you could probably monetize and you haven't thought about it. So for actors, I say you speak, some actors speak 4 languages. They're fluent in languages, or they have extensive dancing background, or they have extensive sports backgrounds, So I say to somebody, what at this age and stage of your life in terms of that kind of expertise at this point is enough that you could be teaching and you could be mentoring and making money in other areas. So basically you're using other facets of yourself that already exist within you without having to go just strictly rely on those sideline jobs like waiter, dog walker, whatever, nanny, all those kind of, other auxiliary jobs. You can actually lean into other things you do. Maybe you're an amazing photographer as well, and you can use that to monetize it, take headshots, or to do other ways that you can subsidize, your business. So the CFO really, besides running the books, paying the bills, knowing about taxes, knowing about exemptions, creating an emergency fund, creating goal timelines, and strategic sideline jobs. Those are really the tent poles of that chapter, because we're on a quick webinar. I can't go into each specifically, but in the book, it will be very, very articulated. And on top of which, in every chapter, I have breakout boxes from people that actually work in this facet of the industry. So there's a huge breakout box in the book by a woman named Rebecca Selko, who does all the financial wellness at the Actors Fund, and she works with creatives all day long. And she's actually created an entire book and scenario, How to Dominate Your Debt. And it's a great book. And so there's a whole piece from Rebecca to corroborate with this piece of the book.
I want to jump in for 1 second, because this was the big thing that translated to me about the CFO, specifically for writers, just because it doesn't seem always like they have the same outlets of like headshots or whatever. But for me, it was like competitions. Every time you enter a competition, anytime you try and get coverage, if you do a pitch session with Roadmap or something, those are all finances that you just think, oh, let me throw out this way. So it was like, very helpful, I think, to think of it that way in terms of like, what are the writing things? And then even lean into some of the writing. Like I, outside of Roadmap, do a lot of like freelance writing, which is a great way to maintain your flexibility and to use the skills you have of writing. There's a ton of ways to find open writing jobs and all that. But anyway, that was one of the ways that specifically translated to me about the writing, which is like, you know, writers have expenses too. If you're trying to get your work out there and seen, it's expensive. If you just want to sit down and do it, great. But even updating your final draft is going to cost you a little bit of money every year. So it's like little things like that. So I just wanted to translate that because that was specifically some of the outlets that's like competitions are expensive, you know, or
That's right.
saving up money to create sizzle reels or, you know, paying someone for a lookbook if that's what you want to, you know, stuff like that, that you need those materials.
And that's where it will circle back into some of the other departments. Some of the things that you just said, they appear in another seat at the table. And the whole idea of this is a cross-section of conversation because really these 7 seats around the table are all interconnected. One really can't function without the other. And the idea is that if you're around the table and you have an objective, the person across from you or that department across from you says, I know that that's your objective, but here's the reason why this isn't going to happen right now. And it might come from the CFO, it might come from another seat at the table, or it might be like, this objective clearly takes precedent over everything else. All the other things are in line to make it happen, and good, you can make that happen. So it'll become more clear as we unpack the seats at the table. But yes, what you said specifically about marketing and things like that are later another seat at the table. The second seat at the table is the HR department. And I always say that the HR department is really there to create a healthy employee, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not a healthy employee, you cannot show up for work. And that means your healthcare. It means your in terms of your physical healthcare and fitness, in terms of your mental health and fitness, in terms of making sure that you have an actual physical health care plan in place so that in case of emergency, that you know you're not going to be hit with a huge financial whammy that you can't take care of. It includes mentor and support networks, and it also has a section in the book under discrimination and abuse, because in all of our businesses, as we go out into the world, we could be subject to that. And if we are not represented and we don't have an agent or a manager, or we're not union and we are starting out, how do we handle things that are compromising us as artists? And I can tell you just specifically, like I can give you an example. The other day, I have an actress who is starting out, and there's a casting director that's called her in a few times and has been really supportive, and finally told her she had booked a role. And she told her to hold this particular week aside, and she told her it was going to be 3 days of shooting. And so this actress is not represented, and she didn't have a written contract because she was going to sign the contract when she got to the set. Between the time that she booked the job and the time she was supposed to shoot it, she got a call that the role had been written out of the project and she was no longer needed on the project. And I said to her, but you were compensated. And she said, no, they never said anything. I said, but you held open your professional availability for a week and you didn't take any other jobs and you couldn't audition for anything else and you couldn't book anything and you held yourself open for 3 days of work. I said, how much were they supposed to pay you? She said, it was like $1,000 because it was going to be, it was maybe 1 to 3 days. She didn't know how many. I said, technically they owe you the $1,000. And that's when that is, somebody needs to advocate, or you need to find a way to advocate. That's what your HR department would be doing for you. Because I said to her, did you talk to anybody about this? Did you get some support for this? Did you mention when you found out you weren't getting the role that, how you would be compensated? And she said, I would never have known to ask or assume that. And so these are ways that if you're not represented, now your agent would never let that happen, or your manager, they would go after something like that. It's like, you book my client. It's not her fault that the role was written out, right? If you're booked on something, then you're due the compensation for it. If you've held up in your professional availability, or there's a negotiation of some kind, like, well, it's maybe not the whole amount, but something. So to talk more specifically, in the HR department, for me, the part of it that really I unpack a lot and that really resonates with me is the mental wellness component of it. I lean heavily in the book into an area called dialectical behavioral therapy. It's dialectics are defined between two opposing ideas that can be true at the same time. And in our business, it's very important to be able to see that there are ways to see things that are true in more than one way. And I think a lot of us, as we go out and we make ourselves, our ideas and our creativity vulnerable, we have a tendency to abdicate power to other people in that way. And then when it's not received a certain way, or when something starts to go down a line and we think we're being successful at it, and then we come to find out we weren't successful at it, we start to build up feelings about that and start to tell ourselves stories about certain things that may or may not be true. And I give a lot of examples that for my actors, I say things like, this is the story of you sitting in a waiting room and the door opens up and the casting director gives the person that's coming out a big hug, and they say to each other, you're, so great to see you. And everybody's laughing, ha, 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 it was so great. And you're sitting there as you're thinking, shit, that's the end of my day, right? And so you're starting to tell yourself this story that has absolutely no bearing in reality. You have no idea what preceded that. You have no idea what is going to come from that. You came there to do a job, yet you let things like that start to waylay you to the place where now it takes away this level of confidence that you were going to walk into the room with, and it undermines what you were there to do. So really the dialectical thinking that I lean into a lot in the book is about letting go of black and white or all or nothing thinking, and finding ways to expand the way you see things and getting unstuck so that you don't create standoffs or conflicts, and it keeps you more approachable, and it also really tests the stories that we tell ourselves. I don't know how. I know as a casting director, I was always auditioning for jobs, just as my actors would audition. I would have to come in with a whole list of ideas of thoughts and, a concept for how I saw a project. And, as I was leaving, I saw 4 other people sitting in the waiting room, other colleagues of mine that I knew were going in on the meeting too. And I think that the important thing is to remember is that there's a reason that my meeting was set up, and there's a reason their meeting was set up, and one has nothing to do with the other. Their work is not mine, and my work is not theirs. And their personality, everything, we're very different human beings. And whoever's not in the hiring end of this has the prerogative to decide which human being they want to spend time with and work with. And there's no right or wrong way. There's no one true way of the way to look at that, other than that's just the way that situation was. So a lot of what DBT does is it teaches you to learn things as information, just to look at things as information and to take the emotion out of it, which has a really, can really waylay you. So I talk a lot about that in the book. I talk a lot about having a support network, and that's basically the HRC. We're really, really expanding the discrimination section of it right now. So I won't go into a lot of detail on that, but we're going to really classify situations. We're going to classify what the union actually will take care of, what actually is, on certain situations. So it will be a much more fleshed out section when we're done with it, but that's HR for you. The next seat at the table would be your marketing and branding company. And this is where, we were talking about this, basically in any business, I don't care what you are or what you do, if you're creative, you walk into a room with a sort of brand. And this also goes with being the CEO. It's almost kind of as if as a CEO, somebody says, what does your company do? And you're like, well, I don't know. We do a lot of things. It's like, that doesn't help me understand what you want to do, what you want to make, how what your focus is. And the whole image that you present to me in that brand makes a difference. If I have a clear-cut idea of what that image is and what that brand is, I can figure out what I want to do with it. But if I'm not clear, if you're putting that responsibility back on me, which a lot of creatives or actors will say, you know, I can do a lot. I can do a lot of things. You know, I'm good in comedy. I'm good in drama. I'm an actor. I can do everything. It's like, well, that doesn't help me. That's not specific. You know, if you can come to me and say, where I kill it is this. And so I was trying to kind of think of an analogy, you know, for the writers. And I was thinking, you know, how writers are so heavily branded. You know, I mean, you tell me I'm going to go to a Quentin Tarantino movie, I know what I'm going to get, right? You tell me I'm going to go see something by Joel Cohen, I know what I'm going to get, right? You tell me I'm going to go see Vince Gilligan, I know what I'm going to get, right? You tell me I'm going to see something by Michael Shore, I know what I'm going to get. I mean, you have very specific voices in writing and in comedy and in drama and in this world. That's their brand. And you can see that the people that have really stayed connected to that brand and connected to that voice have found traction and gotten to be respected and known for that. So the marketing and branding is about building your platform and your brand and promoting that platform and your brand. The next seat at the table is going to be your business development seat. And the business development and the marketing are really good to sit next to each other, because the business development person is the one that's like, okay, I'm in charge of developing everything that makes you as a business run smoothly. So I need you to stay informed. I need you to be out there reading all the, you know, what's going on in the business, who's producing what, who's writing what platforms are producing what. I need you to maintain a contact database, and that database is a personal database and a professional database. So you keep them simultaneously going side by side so that you have both databases to pull from. It's about maintaining correspondence. It's about publicizing yourself, and it's about ultimately getting representation. So the clearer your brand is, and the more you're able to market that brand, the clearer it is for you to publicize yourself, and the clearer it is for you to be able to tell representatives who you are and what you're doing, because those things go hand in hand. The maintaining of correspondence is a lot of creatives find, I don't know why this is, and I'm constantly coaching people through it. You know, you get some positive feedback, you meet somebody at a party, you get somebody in a workshop that you come up to afterwards, and you kind of have a connection with them and you want to know more about them. And your first instinct is, I don't want to bother them. Like, I'm not going to reach out, or I'm not going to bother them. Or they put their email up there and they say, if you have any more questions, here's my email, right? And then you never do anything with it. You take it and you think, oh, you know, they said that, but you know, I'm not going to call them or ask them. Like, I'm not going to be that person. But the truth is, there is a way to maintain correspondence, and there is a way to be that person in a really authentic way. And if you are staying informed, and if you are watching what's happening in the industry, then you have the possibility to go back into these people are professionals that are active in the industry. You will find them. You will find their traction, and you will find their successes in the business. So you have every opportunity to stay informed and to maintain correspondence. And when you do, instead of reaching out for the ask, you reach out with the give. Saw your name in the trade, saw you were nominated I was at your workshop when you spoke with this. Congratulations, right? What a very different mentality about how to reach out and develop correspondence and relationships with people in the industry and develop your business. So that's why I put it under biz development. But it also oddly does create and promote you. So it is a little bit of your own, it is a little bit of your marketing. But marketing is also, I think that seat is also, I talk a lot about it in terms of Instagram and in terms of website and this and that, about curating what those places look like as your gallery. So that if I visit your website, I have a really clear visual of your artistic sensibility and of the work that you've worked on. And I have a very good idea of your aesthetic and what's authentic to you. When you have an Instagram account, I always say, think of an Instagram account as an empty gallery with white walls, and you're an artist, a painter, and they say, this is your time to put together a gallery show. What 20 paintings do you want to hang on the wall? It's the same thing for every creative. What do you want people to see when they look at you through a creative lens? What do you want hanging in that gallery? So the marketing and branding is kind of that piece of it. And the business development is, once that's created, how to kind of propel that forward in staying informed through your database, through correspondence, through the publicity that you create, and ultimately through the representation that you're able to procure. Or if you don't have representation, you need to do that on your own, right? You need to be your own representative, which then leads to the next seat at the table, which is representation. Basically, if every person that's emerging out of a program in BFA, MFAs that I've worked with has always said, I need an agent. I have to get an agent. Now, the writers this year have had a very interesting year because they've had to not have agents, right? And it's been a real sea change, and it's been and what I think is interesting is that I've never told somebody to get an agent right away. And I've actually always thought of agents as a yes but certainly not the only yes, because it is incumbent upon every creative to find places to submit themselves and find places to market themselves and to shine in their meetings and to create their pitches, regardless of who is doing that as your partner in tandem, right? If you have somebody to creatively do that with you, that's great. That's a partner, but they don't work for you. They work with you. So the mindset that you have to be your own representation is about how you create the ability for people to see your work or to get a hold of your work or to find platforms or ways that you can pitch your work, so that then somebody who is interested in that voice or in that idea can come and say, I really dig what you did out there, and I want to have more conversation with you. I'd like to collaborate with you. So I don't know how relevant the representation is for the writers or not writers. It's super relevant for actors, and it's a big hurdle. And so I spend a lot of time with them talking about, even just in pitch meetings, like what to bring in the room and how to talk to people and how to establish relationships. Now, writers, a lot of times, if they're coming into a room, they're pitching a project, right? They're pitching a narrative, or they have they have a tag, they have some sheet, that they've written up, right, with, the narrative, and they're going to give you the sell, right? So they're there for a meeting, and a pitch meeting, they're here for that. But sometimes you take meetings where people just hear about you, or they hear that you were involved in a project, and somebody threw out that it was really wonderful to collaborate with you. And they say, you really should meet this amazing young writer or this emerging writer. They're really interesting. You don't really have anything to pitch, right? And that's really not the point of the meeting. So when you come into these meetings, you're constantly representing yourself. And the ways that you represent yourself and the way you connect with other people in the room is what they'll leave with. I remember meeting actresses and meeting people over the years, and it was always the meetings where we had personal conversation about something that had nothing to do with the industry at all. One gal was a bra salesman and told me all about how she, and I still to this day remember the whole conversation, because it was so refreshing not to talk about, I've got this and I need this, and can I have this, and I wrote this and I did this and I'm in this movie. And it's so refreshing not to have shop talk. It's refreshing to say, well, I just came from Saving the Whales. I was down in, Corona del Mar, and we had this big event, and it was really exciting. And, all of a sudden you're just like, wow, I dig that too. I'm into, Save the Oceans, and you never know where you're going to bring that piece of you in. And this is in representation. You need to open up that window into a larger conversation other than just representation for your work. So that's another seat at the table. Another seat at the table is the VP of creative development. So there's business development, and then there's creative development. The creative development person is really the most applicable to the writer, because this is the person who is finding the stories, right? where are they looking for the stories? And I say, you know, stories appear obviously now everywhere. They're in podcasts, they're in articles, they're in, you know, there's documentaries, there's news stories, everywhere you look, there's magazine articles. So you hear my dogs barking their heads off outside. Hold on, I'm going to get them. I'm going to bring them in. Hold on. I love them, but they're so loud. So the creative VP is the person out there that's creating and finding stories. And where the creative VP really comes into place is they take up a lot of bandwidth. This role takes up a lot of time, and time again equates to money. So in order to have time to really dive into a project that you believe in, or a project that you want to write, or a project that you want to develop, you have to be sure that you're talking to your CFO and saying, you know what, I need 3 hours a day, 3 days a week to work on this. I have to research it. There's going to be, I need to hire somebody. I want to work with somebody. I want to collaborate with somebody. And that person that I want to collaborate with is going to do it. But they kind of need, they want to know if they're doing sweat equity, that's one thing. Maybe I need to pay them like minimum or something to help me, because I can't do all this research myself. So this is where being creative can cost you money. And even if it doesn't cost you actual money, it's going to cost you money in the scheme of what it's taking time away from where you could be earning money. So this is a very important seat at the table. And the only way that seat can be supported is if the other pieces if the other places in the company are prioritizing you and bolstering that objective. You know what I'm saying? So it starts with finding the stories. It then goes into choosing collaborators. You need to find people that are committed and that complement your skills and know what your blind spots are. You need to make sure that you're collaborating with people that are not moving away in 3 months to go live in, wherever to, go, they're going to move to New York, or they're going to move to Indonesia to become a yoga instructor or whatever. And you're like, wait, we were going to do this project together. I always say, when you choose collaborators, when you're starting out, don't choose like 4 or 5 people, choose one person, choose somebody that could be a partner for you in this. Look for your collaborators really carefully, because everybody has their own objectives. And if this objective isn't as much to their heart as it is to your heart, it will corrupt your business. It will corrupt your business because you will have put aside that time and they will not be giving it equal share. So you need to make sure that when you do choose your collaborators, then you sit down and you actually develop outlines and timelines and budgets. I find what's really interesting, I have a lot of creatives that I work for. They're like, I'm going to write a web series. And I'm like, great. That sounds amazing. Like I said, what's the conceit of it? And they'll tell me the tagline and I'll say, that's great. So how many roles are in it? Well, there's 8 roles, but I have like 3 of them already that I know are going to be my friends that are going to be in that. And I'm like, okay, well, what if those friends get full-time work? Then what happens then? Well, then I probably have to look for, I'd have to cast it. Okay, so you're going to have to spend time casting something. Are you going to pay somebody to cast it? Or are you going to ask a favor for somebody to cast it? Where are you going to shoot this? Where does this take place? Oh, it takes place in New York. Well, are you going to get permits to shoot it in New York? How much is that going to cost? Are you going to shoot it? No, well, the whole thing is interior and it takes, place in my apartment. Okay, that's fine. But I really, really push people in creative development to sit down and articulate and outline their project. Who's producing it? Who's going to write it with you? What kind of talent are you going to go after? How do you envision this creative project? And what kind of budget do you have in order to make this work? Does this need to go on a crowdfunding source? Is this something where you have to crowdfund? If you do you have to make a little promo for it? If you do, how much does that promo cost? So I really push a lot in this creative development area, because the other thing that's interesting, when you really force people to articulate it, it gets really uncomfortable. super uncomfortable, because money starts coming into it and time starts coming into it, and depending on other creatives comes into it. And you'll find that an idea that you feel 100% passionate about, it's either going to solidify that passion and you're going to realize, I have to make this, or you're going to realize, I don't really care about this as much as I thought I did, or this isn't an idea that I really want to waylay everything for right now. I'm going to shelf that because I really don't have the bandwidth for it right now, and I haven't really thought about it enough and articulated it enough. So I'm going to put it aside and I'm going to focus on something else. So I push for people to, I'll keep asking questions about the project and asking, and the book will spell that out, so that you really have to kind of come to a reckoning with yourself, which is the whole idea of this model. And so that the VP creates it, pitches it, creates the decks, all that kind of stuff. And they write it, they make it, they share it. So it turns, this whole creative development thing is really hopefully from inception to delivery, and everything in between. But to go through the creative process, you cannot do that if the other pieces of your business are not in place. I mean, if you, if you're not in a good mental place, if you physically are unwell, then it goes back to the HR department. So all of these departments always all work in tandem, right? The last seat at the table is outreach, which whenever I say this seat, everybody's like, I don't really get what that has to do with anything. Because it's not, most creatives have a very strong agenda. They want or they need something. I want to get this project made. I need to get an agent. I need to get that meeting. I need, right? The outreach is where you are not needing. It's where you are giving. And it's about being a connector, and it's about giving with no agenda. So this is the kind of thing where you're always looking for opportunities in outreach to say, I met this amazing writer. She also is an actress. She's really her story's really unique. Maybe it's a story of, she's like a third generation, but the generations before her were, she's a descendant from her great-grandparents were in the concentration camp, and something happened to her in modern day. And this is maybe there's a historian that you're talking to, and all of a sudden, like, you start to realize, oh my God, this is a really cool connection I can make. I know somebody in my life, I'm meeting somebody new here. It's reminding me of this friend. It's reminding me of this other creative. Making a give to create two people and bring them together without any agenda of where you're fitting into any of this. Not like, and maybe then I can write the project, or maybe then I can act in the project. It's only about what can I do to help somebody else further along something in their lives. So I talk a lot about helping friends and contacts within and outside the industry. Even if it yields nothing beneficial in your career, it will change you for the better. You will become a more interesting human being, and it will change you on a cellular level as a person. It will stop being so much about what is going on here and more of what's going on out in the world. So a lot of outreach, I talk about volunteering. That's one of the sections of the help others, full stop. Indulge a hobby, explore an interest completely unrelated to your profession. And I'm trying to think. Oh, one of the things that I talked about was, and this really resonated for me. I know the comedian Hannah Gadsby. Have you heard of her? I saw her Netflix special, and in it she talks a lot about her background in art history. right? And what struck me was that she used that in her routine, but she was incredibly interesting and incredibly knowledgeable in a refreshing kind of unorthodox way. And she regaled the audience with pieces of history that colored my perception of Van Gogh and of Picasso in ways that I had never thought about. And I was intellectually drawn to her and interested in her as a human being. And the performer part of her was completely secondary. It was just a platform that she happened to be sharing her thoughts on, which was fortuitous. But I tell the story because I think we are all interesting in so many other ways. We all have passions and we all have opinions. And sometimes we're rewarded for voicing those opinions. And sometimes we're taught to keep them to ourselves. But we all have them, and they're tied to our values and our interests and our self-worth. So I ask all the time, how can I be a truly effective artist if I haven't explored that side of myself? So I want to create this seat at the table for outreach, to create a chance to experience things with no agenda, with an open heart, with an open mind, and to get involved in the world. And from those experiences come stories, come connection, come experience, right? And from those things come material and opportunity and collaboration. Politics, religion, women's issue, environmental, art, music, poetry, storytelling, the veterans, the homeless food banks, physically challenged, lecture series, cooking, nutrition, health-related organizations, book clubs. I mean, it goes on and on. But we are all the sum of our parts. And sometimes I would contend that our parts are sometimes more interesting and we don't lean into them enough. And it's what people really do connect to. So I talk a lot about the connection. And I think that it's always a surprise when I just did something called Stockings with Care over Christmas. It's a thing that the casting directors all get together, and we spend 3 days putting together wish lists for underserved families. And it's been going on for years and years. And I went there just to roll up my sleeves and work. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody that signed up. By the time I left there, I had met 2 other colleagues that were casting directors. I had met 3 actors that I was so starstruck I could barely speak, and I've known them throughout my career, but to like work alongside of them was so fantastic. And I wasn't there to do anything but to give, but it wound up being this wonderful thing. And we all met and collaborated with each other on something that we cared about. And we left knowing that we had had this experience together, and we could now go back out again and talk to our business development department and say, I met this great guy and we were doing Stockings with Care. I'm going to write him a note and tell him how fantastic it was to work on a cause like that together, and happy holidays. And, thanks for contributing. And you know what I mean? So all these seats always come back around to something else. So that's it in a nutshell. I saw that my objectives were to talk about being the CEO of your career, tackle mental hurdles, and stay active when no one's calling. So to me, this model, this boardroom table model, filling in the seats, gives you permission to work all these different facets of your career at different times, at the same time. You can create a time management system where you say, today I'm going to wake up, I'm going to check in with HR, I'm going to have a good breakfast, I'm going to work out, I'm going to go to my shrink, I'm going to do some yoga, do some meditation. I'm then going to decide, what I want to do on how I want to promote myself today, what I want to post on Instagram, if anything, or if there's anything that's in my up and coming for me. I'm going to reach out to that person I met last week. I'm going to write them a letter. I'm going to congratulate them. Oh, this person just got this award. I'm going to congratulate them for that. I'm going to work on a project that I feel really passionate about. I just heard about this amazing story of this athlete that I'm very compelled to write about. I'm going to start researching that. And it all just winds up becoming a time slot for those kind of things. So I talked a lot, and now I want to hear from everybody.
It's so great. I just want to praise this a couple more times as people formulate their questions. But one thing that this model did for me, I came home and I was so jazzed, and I'm even more jazzed hearing it again. One of the things that it did for me, especially when you're talking about like outreach, one thing we talk about at Roadmap specifically is like, you're a human first. You know, so many times like you do these pitch sessions, you're hoping obviously to get your creative work forwarded, but at the same time you're a person first. And so you need to be that, you need, you know, in order to be memorable and interesting, to be a person first. And sometimes I think with writers, what happens is they're like, you know, people want the outside validation before they believe that they're a writer. And it's like, or if they've spent their lifetime or career doing something else, but have always written or something, it's like, that makes you interesting. And that adds to your stories. And as a fellow type A, it helps to be like, okay, today, creative development, we CFO let us, we worked all week, we didn't write, we only wrote 10 minutes or whatever. And then this day is dedicated to writing. And this is it's taking the long run rather than kind of the short, like every day has to be this, or I have to do this in order to feel like I'm validated in some way. And
exactly. These are not, you don't have to do these every single, you know, you can do this in your own time management system. On the book, I will actually create sample scenarios. So you'll see like, here's the life, you know, of this particular creative person, and this is their goal. And this is what they've articulated as their goal. I also think that I said this, and I really believe this. I think when you're starting out, especially, I think, you know, you need to kind of decide what your lane's going to be going out and really dedicate yourself to that. So that if you want to write for half-hour sitcom and that is your thing, then honor that, stay with that, work with that, and don't let things pull you and push you away from that objective if that is truly what you want to, it's how you want to emerge and what you want to start out in. Once you start out strong in a lane and people start to see you and get traction, they hear your voice, they get your style, you'll start to have more opportunity to stretch and push in other areas. But there has to be something tangible or understandable from the beginning. And I think the other thing, you said something and it just sparked in me. Well, anyway, you said something in the beginning, but I don't remember. So
be a human first was our big
thing.
Yeah,
I know that's right. This is a relationship business. The entertainment business is a relationship business. And it's all about, it really is all about relationships. And people will help you and they will respond if they feel that they have an authentic relationship. If they feel that they're being come at because you want something from them, or you're only saying something so that you can get something in the same sentence. I'll give you another great example. This same actress that didn't get compensated, I said to her, you know what? This casting director's called you in so many times now. Now you really need to take her out for coffee. You need to thank her for being a supporter of yours. And she said, how do I do that? I said, you're going to write her and say, you've been a great supporter of mine. I would love to invite you to the next, I'm doing this amazing spoken word evening. I'd love you to be my guest. And if you can't make it all the way up to the Bronx, she lives in New York. If you can't make it all the Bronx, at least let me take you to a cup of coffee or to a drink, pick your poison, because you've been such a great supporter of mine. And within about 5 minutes, she got a response back. And the woman said, love to. I'm available this day, this time, let's go out for coffee. But my actress said to me, with this letter, can I attach my new piece of film? And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I said, because if you do that, it seems that you're only reaching out so that you can now show her your film. I said, one has nothing to do with the other. First, reach out, go to coffee with her, recognize her, celebrate her for supporting you and being a champion for your career, for being the yes in the room. And then at that coffee, later when you're leaving, say, oh my God, I forgot, something else just came in that I'm really excited about. Do you want me to send it to you? Then you can send it. But don't mess the two together, because then it seems that you're only doing it so that you can get something. And that's not a real give. The real give is to go out, take her to coffee, and celebrate her for being a supporter of yours and further the relationship. And that's it. And nothing else has to happen that day. nothing. Then later you can send something along. But don't use those opportunities of corresponding or reaching out to like, if I give you this, then I want to get this. That's not the spirit at all. Okay, any other questions?
Any questions? If people have questions, April's loving this. April's doing some chats.
I see April.
Do people have questions you want to pop in the box? I'm going to hold up just in case we want to see it. These were my notes. This is my little circle that she suggested you write. So if you're curious, let's take a screenshot. Not that you have to use this one, but this is like, you know, my chicken scratch. This is the idea that. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe, very much.
I actually had an actor who, one of the people in the, I don't know if he's an actor, honestly. He's a creative that went there. He created the most beautiful, articulated, he did it on like, you know, on the computer and created these like really cool squares and this and that. And he's like, I'm using it as a daily worksheet now. I'm just filling it in on a, you know, daily, weekly basis or whatever. I was so impressed. I said, can I use what you just drew? Can I use the way you drew that up and articulated that? Can I use that in the book? And he's like, sure.
Quick question before the Q&A popped in. When is the book available? Unless that's a question.
I've been asked that. So the book right now is almost completed. I have additional research because, as I said, every time I introduce a concept, my goal is to collaborate with somebody who can further articulate that concept, who's an expert in that field.
Yeah.
So I'm in the process now of all the Q&A and gathering the interviews. And so the research part of it is not completely done, but it's in a good enough form that I'm taking a meeting in next month, actually, and hopefully we'll get this representation to really get some funding to get the rest of it done. But with all going well, it should be done by the end of the year. And then the question is, I don't know what to call it, because originally I was calling it, as you know, the executive actor and the seats at the boardroom table. And now I'm being told, well, this isn't just for actors. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. So all right, I see a question. Hold on. Let's see. You recommended creating a contact database and a something database. I didn't catch the second one. Creating a contact database, a professional and a personal database. The personal database is friends, friends, fellow creatives. The professional database are people that work within the industry that have like creative careers. For instance, I say to my actors, makeup artists, hair does, hair, makeup, hair, wardrobe, fellow writers, the PAs, all the people that are working in the industry alongside trying to work their creativity into making it into their career, right? All that. So all these people are they bolster your database. So be generous with that in terms of where you find them. And you can decide who is a personal and who is a professional in terms of that. But that's the two kinds of databases that I would keep. Everything you're saying is ringing true. Any suggestions on a complete cold call approach to make it warmer? I'm assuming start with a compliment, like you said, but what if you don't have an opportunity to approach someone in person at an event? The same. So if there's a reason that you want to approach somebody, it's because you're either aware of their work, or you've been following them, or you're inspired by them, or they did something that was seminal for you or resonated with you. I don't think it's a bad thing if you're in an event and you find that there's an opportunity, is to come up and just introduce yourself and say, I wanted to have an opportunity to meet you in person, to just let you know how much your work has resonated with me, how much it's influenced me, and how much I appreciate what you're doing in the world, and how much it's impacted me. That's all, and nothing may come of that. People like to know that they're making a mark in the world. People feel good about that. When I reached out, David Rubin, who's a casting director, he cast Big Little Lies. And I watched it, and I haven't talked to him in many years, but his casting was so amazing that I reached out to him and I said, I am glued to the television every night, you know, wondering who done it in this series. The casting is spectacular. The story spectacular. Congratulations, right? Amazing project. And immediately came back, you know, wow, this is so nice to hear from you, Wendy. Thank you so much for, again, correspondence with the give. So it was a bit of a cold. I knew David, he's a colleague of mine, but again, we haven't talked in a long time. But if you reach out with a give, the cold, it's authentic because there's something motivating you to do that. I don't know if I answered that completely, but I think you have to know that you are worthy of conversation and that your opinion and the way you experience things are important to the other creatives that are out there. A lot of great info. Thank you, Wendy. May I please ask, what does one do when you're new to an exec and you want to gain traction with them? Well, again, I think that the relationship that you're creating with that executive has to do with number one, with the work that you're creating and the way that you can watch that executive and support them in their career as well. If you know that they're working on, if you know that they're working on what they're working on, tell them how inspiring that story sounds or how interesting that must be to be able to work on that you too had heard about that story. Any way where you can kind of enter into their world and bolster them and make them feel supported rather than, I really need you, executive who holds all the power, to support me. You don't let that power balance become the decider. You keep the playing field level by proceeding with a purpose, and that is to get to know that person in the most authentic way possible. So whether it's to just watch through the trades, to watch the projects that they get made, through other people that may collaborate with them, however you can authentically connect and have conversation, that is how you further relationships with executives. Nobody likes to be... you can smell inauthenticity, and you can smell it when somebody has an agenda and they want something for you. It's really highly unattractive. And you know that the people that are the most confident, that seem like they know what's going on, they've got their shit together, those are the people we're drawn to. We're like, I want that, right? We don't want the person that's like, please like me, please listen to me, please listen, let me pitch. Can I just tell you one more thing? Those people are like, I don't want that right now, right? It's human nature. It just is human nature. Let's see. My spouse is a creative. Would you recommend filing out our individual tables and our table together and seeing where they conflict or coincide? Listen, your journey as a creative is your journey. And I think you have to create your own table and your own agenda. If you two are collaborating, if you're collaborators, then there is a crossover at the table. And this is a perfect example of like, choose your collaborators carefully. If they're a spouse, they're hopefully not going anywhere. That's a good collaborator. As long as you respect the fact that each of you runs your business and each of you is going to approach your business a little bit differently. So I would say if you're in business with your spouse or collaborating with your spouse, setting out the objectives of what you want for your company and what your priorities are is very important. And not feeling like you have to apologize for those or to acquiesce in order to keep the partnership or to keep the collaboration happy or successful. There has to be a complete come to the table. I want to lean into these three areas right now. These are really important to me. This is what I see. That's my vision. That's my intention. And if it doesn't coincide, that's okay. Let's take a 6-month hiatus from our collaboration and do our separate things. And we come back together once we, set a timeline. I said, set a timeline, set a budget. If I set my timeline and my budget and in 6 months from now, it's not articulated, and this other thing that I could be doing collaboration-wise actually could have more traction, then maybe it's time for me to reassess and come back and look at it a different way. But I think you always have to honor your own creative vision and journey and make sure it doesn't get manipulated or waylaid just because of a relationship or a collaboration. So that I feel really strongly about that. For someone who's attempting to rebrand themselves as a writer, from horror to drama, are there any pitfalls we should look out for? No, I think the beauty of what we have right now in the world, especially with the internet and with all the resources that you have available, you can rebrand yourself tomorrow. And you can do it any way you want. And again, this can be through Instagram, this can be through your website, but you can be like, I am now a horror writer, right? And you can start living in that world and working in that circle and embracing that ideology. And you don't have to say, oh, well, this is all I did before. You don't have to make excuses for that. All you have to do is show the world, this is a facet of me and I really dig it. And this is where I'm leaning now. So either jump on this ride with me or don't, but this is the road I'm taking. Making the declarative statements, getting in the lane, staying in the lane, and supporting it with your company around you is really all you need. I don't think people have to apologize for having multiple facets to their talent. And if you want to explore this horror genre, then create a timeline for it and create something that's concrete around it so that you can dive into it and support it and see where it leads you. You know, if it doesn't, you'll find at a certain point that you may want to pivot back and go back to the drama or go back to another area. And I think the pivoting is one of the most important pieces in our business. You know, a lot of people are always afraid. It's like, well, if I make this declarative statement and I get halfway down the road, what happens if I'm not then going to be that person anymore? It's like, that's okay. That is the best news possible, because then you've articulated that, you can pivot and you can go down another road, another direction. So that's just fear. That's just fear-based talking. Might I add that there have been very little of what you do creatively. Might I add that there has been very little of what you do creatively. Just how do you schmooze? Or is that just not a good idea? I don't know if you're asking how do you schmooze in general? Like, what if you're just somebody who's not comfortable being a schmoozer? Can you write in the chat if that's what you were talking about? Is he there? Let's see. Yes. Okay. Yeah, see, I started as an actress. You started as an actress, right? So we are, we're pretty comfortable with like talking and putting ourselves out there. But I can totally, having now sat with a writer's hat on and seeing how solitary writing can be, and seeing how many times I actually go to the refrigerator in 1 hour when I'm trying to write, I completely understand how a writer's life is really different. So I'm really appreciating that now more than ever. And
it's also crazy how clean your house becomes, right? All the
right, yeah. Or like I said, how empty your refrigerator gets. Yeah. I'm hungry all the time, and I don't know why. But I would say that, you know, it's not, I don't want you to think of it as a schmooze, because a schmooze to me feels inauthentic. You are a writer, and the stories that come into your head and the things that interest you and the journeys that you take to learn about things are wildly interesting to other people. So you just bring that person to the table and be a good listener. You don't have to always talk. You can just be a really good listener and receive. And when the time's right and you hear something that really resonates with you, it'll be authentic. It's not, you don't have to insert yourself. Sometimes you can just be a really good listener. That's the give. That's the reaching and allowing somebody to come to you. That's the supporting of someone else. Maybe in the schmooze, all it is asking them questions about themselves and about what they do and how they go about it, and get them to realize I'm actually an interested person in other people other than just the furthering of my objective, which is what to me schmooze is synonymous for. So I guess if you frame it differently, it becomes a much more accessible thing to do. Gerald, does that help? You can say yes or no in the comment column. Susan. Yes. Oh, good. Okay. I'm curious about your thoughts about branding yourself visually, for instance, on Instagram as a writer. You know, I think what I would say to you is before book art really became something that is less, well, book art's still really prevalent. The cover of a book, the visuals of a book, right? Have always been very iconic, right? There's certain books literature that we've read over time where the cover of that book still resonates in our mind. I think as you write and the world that you're writing about, the visuals that surround that can be represented on Instagram. I think if you are surrounded by family, if you're surrounded by culture, if there are things that are resonating in your writing that are also resonating in your personal life, that's a way to share an authentic piece of yourself and to curate a gallery that represents you as a writer. If there are quotations that fill your soul, or other writers' work that you read and thought, damn, I wish I had written that. That is so friggin' beautiful. Share it. Put it up on Instagram. That's how you share pieces and curate your gallery as a writer. Obviously, it's a little easier for actresses to do that because they're creating more of a visual, here's me as a bohemian, and here's me with my nieces and nephews, and here's me as so we have a chance to see them, but we also can curate that look and that person, that image as a writer too. It can reflect us. So look at that gallery and decide how you want to paper the walls with pieces of your inspiration, of yourself. And only do it when it feels right, and only do whatever feels right. You don't need to feed a beast. You don't need to post all the time. You don't need to compare if somebody has likes over this or this over that. That's completely inconsequential. This is for you to try and create conversation and a following. And I always say when people post like on Facebook or if they do, Instagram Live or whatever, I think I always like it when somebody asks me, like engages me. Like, I read this and it really filled my soul. Does this resonate with you? How do you feel about this? Let your audience talk back to you. I'm writing this. I wrote this. I wrote this as the opening for whatever, and I'm sharing it here. What do you think? How do you like this voice? Just much the way I sat and started teaching the book was we started out by me saying, I said to everybody, I want this to be I want your feedback. Like, I may say something, but it may not resonate with you. Talk to me. Engage. Branding and marketing is a chance for people to engage and to talk with you. You have so many different ways you can make that happen. She wrote, so much more interesting than taking pictures of myself. Banging my head against the computer. But also, that's a fantastic image too. So, you got to throw one of those in too, because who can't relate to that? I can relate to that, having now gone down this journey as a writer. It's so true. Let me see if there's any other questions that I can help with. What can you do when you haven't heard from execs after they've requested your scripts? The follow-up is a gentle finesse, right? I don't know how much time has gone by. I don't know who requested it or how they requested it. So I'm just going to create a fake scenario. Let's say you were asked to you wrote a spec script. It was submitted to them. You got some feedback and they asked you to do a rewrite. And you've sent the rewrite in and it's gotten to be quiet. It's crickets. And you don't know now what's happening. This is where that dialectical thinking is going to come into help, right? Because there's more than one true way to look at something. So immediately your insecure artist is going to say, they hate my script. They're not going to do it. They read the rewrite or whatever, and they're just not interested anymore, right? But the dialectical way to look at it is that executive, what's going on with that executive? Has something happened in their personal life? Are they even in town? How much, you know what I'm saying? There's so many pieces of this that you have not reality tested. So I think the first thing is just to try and find out what's the landscape actually surrounding this. So what's going on with this executive? Were they pulled off of all other development projects and only put on this and didn't even have time to communicate with that with you? So I would try and find out what the atmosphere is. And then I would gently reach out and say, collaboration with you has been such a joy so far. And of course I would love to continue down this journey. And if there's any chance to have some feedback on the last thing that we talked about with each other, it would be really helpful for me. It would be really, I would love to create that opportunity. And if you find that there's a window to be able to communicate with them, but don't assume that just because you haven't heard, or just because something lies dormant, or it feels awkward to have to circle back, you don't assume any of that. Just go forward with purpose, go forward with your worthiness, go forward with your talent. Don't put your insecure hat on, and look at the landscape, find out what the real story is that's going on behind that, and then navigate within that real landscape. That's my suggestion. I don't know if that's helpful, but I'm curious about your thoughts about branding yourself visually. Oh, we already did that. Thanks a lot. Wise advice. I think that's pretty much all the questions. I don't see any other questions on the Q&A. You guys, very thoughtful questions though. And it usually does circle around how to position yourself and how to take a seat, a real solid seat at the table. And the truth is, if you think of yourself as running a business, you are a business person. There is no CEO in the world that does not believe that the business they're running is an unworthy institution to be the CEO of, right? I mean, they are like, my company's badass, right? Otherwise I wouldn't be the CEO of it, right? I'd go do something else. So know that that's where you come from, that point of worthiness, come from that point of the business standpoint, and treat it like a business. Give it the respect that it needs as a business. It's not personal. None of this is personal. It's information and it's business. And when you can take it out of that, I get that creative tends to go into that emotional mind. If you can try and find somewhere between the emotional mind and the intellectual mind, if you can find the wise mind in between, that middle, where the two circles come together, that's where you want to try and operate, in that wise space. Because you would never be able to derail a CEO of a company. If you tried to poke a hole in their business, they'd be like, who the hell are you? This business is solid. So think about it as being solid. Give it permission to be solid. I'm just getting all these. It's so fun. I like the chat. Chat's the most fun because it gives you feedback right on the spot.
It looks like one more question popped in on.
Okay. I'm curious on your thoughts on query letters. A query letter meaning, explain query letter. Can you
like writers do it a lot, where they'll be like, hey, I'm this type of writer to production companies or representation or anything like that. I don't know if you've gotten them or if you've seen them. Maybe you've used them for publishers or something. Also, Nicholas, if that's not what you were talking about, Nicholas, they're just like cold letters, it's cold emails sent about seeing if there's open writing assignments or anything that there's someone that they can do, usually cold. But Nicholas, if you want to clarify too.
You mean this is when you are doing the kind of like this reaching out, these cold callings, right?
Yeah, pretty cold. Yeah. It looks like
I'll tell you something. When I started this business, we're rebranding it now. It started out called College to Career Acting because it was really to help emerging artists go from BFA, MFA programs and emerge into the industry. But now we're rebranding this. But when I started out, I took a trip to New York, and I absolutely did not know anybody at these 5 schools, and I targeted 5 schools, and I went in totally cold, and I stuck out my hand. And I said, I really want to meet you and explain to you what my passion and what my vision is and why I think this is a really needed bridge for kids coming out of academia. And I had all different kinds of responses. I had like, oh, that's a really good idea, but we really can't do anything with that. Or, yeah, that's nice, but we're not really in the business to, to train anybody to be in like a trade school. We're just teaching them process, and then it's their problem after that. And, you know, I went forward with my mission, and I didn't let my purpose get waylaid by somebody's acceptance of it or not, right? I felt that what I had was worthy, and I felt it was important. So I think whenever you're sending a query out, first, I think you have to try and establish some kind of relationship or some kind of connection. So I don't think you can just send cold emails out asking for things when nobody knows you and they have no awareness of kind of the world that you come from. So I think it's more on you to get to know them and to get to know, and for me to understand why you're reaching out specifically to that person and why you think that query letter would resonate with them. When you have something specific to talk to them about or something specific to present, that to me is that's a stronger introduction, in other than just like, my name is so-and-so and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Those are these general, they have no direction to them. So I say, go try and maintain or create those people in your database and create that professional circle. And the more you can immerse yourself with them, then you can start to circle into what you need or how to pitch something or how to make a general query. Sometimes these query letters, if a resume is attached, a lot of times, you know, it goes through an aggregator or whatever, you know, and buzzwords will come out, and you might get a response just based on the fact that there are certain things in your resume that resonate or that are, you know, buzzwords that they're looking for, keywords that they're looking for. So I just feel that on the whole, general query letters are really tough if I don't know the person or if I don't know anything about them. I'd rather somebody make some kind of introduction first or have some other kind of way to come into that person's life before I ask them for something. So perhaps explain if an actor writes to you to intro themselves as a comparison. So yeah, okay, so if an actor were to write to me as a casting director, well, first of all, again, if they were reading the trades or watching the trades, it would mean a lot to me to say, I've been watching and learning about the Center for Emerging Artists. And I think the work that you're doing for emerging artists is so impactful. The way you reached out to me after we had that, you know, wow, that seminar really knocked my socks off. You helped me see this, you helped me learn this. You gave me tangibles. And I thought, wow, I feel really heard. And I feel really seen. And I think when people feel that way, they immediately want to return in kind. So I immediately said to you, let's get coffee, right? We're not elusive human beings. We're just not. We like to feel seen, and we like to be understood for the things that we're passionate about. And if a fellow creative validates that, it's very rewarding, very rewarding. So I don't know if that explains how an actor would reach out to me, but I don't think it's I don't think it's dissimilar than the way you reached out to me, honestly. Yeah. I'm curious about your thoughts on query letters. Yeah. No, that's it. Cold calling versus email. Yeah. And I think, you know, look at calls. I also think that in today's day and age, you know, nobody talks anymore. Everybody's emailing and texting and blah, blah, blah. I will never, ever create a relationship with anybody over an email or a text. I just won't. You're going to create relationships with people in person. You're going to create relationships with people when you talk to them. The goal is to be able to have that access and to talk to them. That's what we have lost along the way. And that's what we have to really work to get back, is that connection. Because once I meet you and I like you and we have things that we want to talk about in common, I'm motivated. You know, I'm motivated to keep the conversation going. So I would always look to try and make some kind of connection in person if you can. I love these comments. They're very nice. You guys are all super nice. I don't know if there's ever been any like mean chats off to the side, but like bullshit. This is I hate this thought.
It's usually me, and I get caught. Everyone's like, "Stop! You're supposed to be moderating." I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I think our webinars are great.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else? Otherwise,
that's it. It looks like that's it, and that's our time too. So unless people have last minute, no, this was great.
I will tell anybody that wants to reach out to me separately that you can reach out to me until we rebrand. It's still CTC Acting, CTC, and then the word acting @gmail.com. So if you want to stay in touch, if you want to know more about the book, if you want to become part of a focus group, we're doing, we have one more focus group coming up in Beverly Hills. Post email Addie here. Okay, I can do that. Let me do that. Yep. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So if you, the focus groups have been really, really, really cool. We're down to the last 3 seats at the table, and we'll go into much more articulation. And these focus groups, I'm really being taken to task by a couple people in them who are really saying, wait a minute, if you say this, then don't you think you should also say that? Or you know what, you don't need to say that because you've already said that once before, and all you need to say is see above. And I'm like, really? That's all I need to say as a writer? I need to write the whole thing again? They're like, no, we get it. So it's been really fun to have this feedback. So if anybody's interested in the last focus group, I'd be really happy to have more voices, more thoughts at it. So reach out through CTC Acting if you want to come and be a part of that. And that's it.
Wendy,
you're a rock star. Thank you for encouraging me to think about this for other creatives.
Yes, I think it's so applicable, and I think people's positive reactions are a testament to that. So great. Thank you for doing this. Thank you everybody for coming and for your great questions, and can't wait to read the book.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.